When John Cena stepped out of the supermarket, he never expected his quiet evening to turn into a nightmare. A terrified little girl grabbed his sleeve, her tear-filled eyes pleading for help. Then she whispered 3 chilling words that made John freeze in place. His instincts kicked in, and within seconds he set off a chain of events that no one saw coming. The golden hues of the setting sun cast long shadows across the supermarket parking lot as John Cena stepped out, balancing several grocery bags in his hands. Dressed in a simple jacket and jeans, he blended in with the evening crowd, just another man finishing his errands. The warm evening breeze carried the scent of asphalt and fresh-cut grass, mixing with the faint aroma of baked bread from the store behind him. He had no idea that in the next few moments, his quiet evening would take a turn he would never forget. As he approached his black pickup truck, ready to load his bags into the back seat, he felt a sudden tug on the sleeve of his jacket. It was soft but urgent. John turned, expecting to see a familiar face or perhaps a fan wanting a quick picture. Instead, he found himself looking down into the wide, tear-filled eyes of a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 6. Wispy blonde curls framed her pale face, and her pink dress fluttered slightly in the evening breeze. But it wasn't her appearance that struck him. It was the way her tiny hands trembled as they clutched the fabric of his jacket, as if letting go would mean something terrible. Her chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths, and her lips parted as if she wanted to speak but couldn't. John immediately crouched down to her level, concern etching deep lines into his face. "Hey there, kiddo. Are you lost?" The girl flinched at the word, her head jerking slightly as she glanced over her shoulder. Her big blue eyes darted between the parked cars, searching, not for her parents, not for help, but for something, or worse, someone. John's heart tightened. This wasn't just a lost child. This was a child in fear. Finally, she opened her mouth, and the words that tumbled out made his blood run cold. "He's not my dad." For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The world continued moving around them. The beep of shopping carts, the idle chatter of customers walking past, the distant honk of a car. But for John, those 4 words crashed into his reality like a hammer to glass. Before he could react, a voice, smooth, yet unervingly sharp, cut through the air behind him. "There you are." John turned, his instincts kicking in immediately. A woman approached, her strides deliberate, yet not rushed enough to draw immediate suspicion. She was dressed casually in jeans and a fitted blouse, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. She looked like any ordinary suburban mother, but John noticed the small details. The way her eyes never quite softened with warmth, the way her smile was stretched too thin, the way her fingers curled slightly at her sides, as though ready to seize control of the situation. The little girl's grip on his jacket tightened. The woman crouched down, her hands reaching out, but instead of comforting the girl, they latched onto her shoulders with just a little too much force. "My God, you scared me," she exclaimed with a forced laugh. "You know you can't just run off like that, sweetheart." John didn't move. He didn't blink. He studied everything. How the girl stiffened under the woman's grasp, how she avoided eye contact, how her small hands clenched into fists at her sides. She did not react the way a lost child would upon being found. No sigh of relief, no rush into the woman's arms. Nothing but silent terror. The woman turned to him, flashing another hollow smile. "Thank you so much for watching over her, Mr. Cena. You're a real hero." She used his name casually, as if it would disarm him, as if recognizing him would make him comply. "I'm her aunt. She must have wandered off while we were shopping. Kids, right?" She let out another light-hearted chuckle, but John saw it then, the way her knuckles whitened against the child's arms. John's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Is she okay?" "Oh, yes, of course. She's just shy." The woman tightened her grip slightly, prompting the girl to flinch. "Aren't you, sweetheart?" Still, the girl said nothing. Her eyes, however, said everything. John crouched down again, leveling his gaze with hers. "You want to go with her?" The girl swallowed hard, her lips parting slightly, the smallest movement as if she were about to answer. But before she could, the woman's hand squeezed down, her fingers pressing deep into the child's small shoulders. "Of course she does," the woman cut in sharply. Her voice was just a little too quick. Then she forced out another laugh, She's just scared because she got lost. Right, sweetheart? The girl's throat bobbed as she swallowed. Her eyes darted to John, pleading. She didn't need to say a word. He understood. The woman stood, brushing off her jeans and giving a tight-lipped smile. Anyway, thanks for your help, Mr. Cena, but we'll be on our way now. John didn't move. Wait! The single word made the woman freeze in place. She turned her head slightly, a flicker of something sharp and dangerous flashing across her face before she quickly masked it with another empty smile. Excuse me? John kept his eyes on the child. What's her name? The woman blinked, just a fraction of a second too long. Then she forced another laugh, but this time it was thinner, weaker. And of course, silly me. You know how kids are, always wandering off, always looking for adventure. But John had already seen the truth. The girl, Anna, hadn't reacted. No flicker of recognition, no confirmation. And then the final piece clicked into place. This woman knew the girl's name before she had even spoken. John felt a chill settle deep in his chest. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an aunt retrieving a lost niece. This was something much, much worse. His muscles coiled, his stance shifting slightly. Not aggressive, not yet, but positioned. Ready. I think, John said slowly, we should ask store security for help. Just to be sure. The woman stiffened. It was quick, barely noticeable. But John saw it. He caught the rapid blink, the subtle shift in her weight, as if preparing to bolt. Her fake smile widened. But now her eyes were scanning the parking lot. Searching. Looking for something. No, looking for someone. And that's when John saw it. Near the far end of the lot, tucked between two parked cars, was a black SUV. The engine was still running, exhaust curling into the air. And just beside it, standing half hidden in the shadows, was a man. Watching. Waiting. John's jaw tightened as realization crashed over him. This wasn't just a case of mistaken identity. This was a planned abduction, and he had just walked straight into the middle of it. John Cena's muscles tensed, his heartbeat accelerating as he locked eyes with the man standing beside the black SUV. There was no mistaking it now. The way the man remained still, the way his stance exuded control and patience. This wasn't some concerned parent looking for a lost child. This was someone waiting for a signal. The woman must have sensed John's shift in demeanor because her grip on the little girl tightened, her fingers digging into the child's shoulder in a way that was almost imperceptible. But John saw it. He saw the way the child flinched, her body stiff as if preparing for the worst. John's voice remained calm, though there was a new edge of authority in it. I don't think we need to rush things. Maybe we should head back inside, find security, and make sure everything checks out. The woman's smile wavered just slightly before she let out a light laugh. Oh, that won't be necessary. She's my niece, really. She's just a little shy around strangers. Aren't you, sweetheart? The girl's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. Go on, tell him. The woman urged, her voice just a little too sharp beneath the faux sweetness. John could see the girl's internal battle. Fear warred with something else, a desperate hope that someone had finally noticed, that someone might actually do something. He wasn't about to let her down. John shifted slightly, his stance becoming more deliberate. If everything's fine, then you won't mind if we just take a quick walk over to security. He didn't give her time to protest. Instead, he extended his hand to the girl, offering her a way out. Come on, sweetheart. Let's go talk to someone who can help. The woman's entire body went rigid. For a fraction of a second, John saw the real fear in her eyes. Not the fear of losing a child, but the fear of being caught. And that's when she made her move. With a sudden burst of energy, she yanked the little girl backward, spinning her toward the SUV. The driver reacted immediately, the vehicle's doors swinging open as the man inside moved to intercept them. John didn't hesitate. In a flash, he lunged forward, grabbing the woman's wrist and pulling her back just as she tried to shove the girl into the waiting vehicle. The woman let out a sharp yelp, her nails digging into his forearm, but he barely registered the pain. Run! John barked at the girl, his voice booming across the parking lot. The girl hesitated for just a moment before she turned and bolted, her small legs carrying her as fast as they could toward the supermarket entrance. The driver was already out of the car, a large man dressed in dark clothing, his features partially obscured by the shadows. He moved quickly, his intent clear, stop the girl before she could reach safety. John wasn't about to let that happen. In an instant, he released the woman and lunged at the driver, his massive frame colliding with the man's just as he reached for the child. The impact sent them both stumbling backward, but John recovered first, using his momentum to slam the driver against the side of the SUV. The man grunted in pain, but he was trained. He recovered quickly, twisting his body and throwing a wild punch toward John's ribs. John blocked it easily, countering with a powerful jab to the man's stomach. The driver doubled over for just a moment, but it was enough. John grabbed the back of his shirt and swung him around, throwing him away from the vehicle. The woman, seeing the chaos unfolding, tried to make another grab for the child, but John wasn't done yet. "I don't think so," he growled, stepping between them. She hesitated, her eyes darting toward the SUV, realizing that her only way out was gone. And then the sirens began. The distant wail of approaching police cars sent a visible wave of panic through the kidnappers. The woman shot one last desperate look at the driver, who was still trying to shake off the impact of John's blows. "Forget it," she hissed at him before turning on her heel and sprinting toward the other side of the parking lot. The driver hesitated for a moment before following her lead, the two of them disappearing into the rows of parked cars, just as the first police vehicle skidded to a halt near the supermarket entrance. John exhaled sharply, turning just in time to see the little girl collapsing into the arms of a panicked woman, her mother. For a long moment, everything else faded. The chaos, the adrenaline, the distant shouts of police officers. All John could see was the way the girl clung to her mother, her tiny fingers gripping the fabric of her shirt as if she would never let go again. John Cena wasn't a superhero. He was just a man who had been in the right place at the right time. But at that moment, as he watched the mother and daughter reunite, he knew that sometimes being in the right place was enough. And somewhere, just beyond the edge of the parking lot, the kidnappers were still out there. This wasn't over. The sound of sirens filled the air, the flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the rows of parked cars. John Cena stood tall, his chest rising and falling as the adrenaline still pulsed through his veins. He glanced at the little girl, now safely wrapped in her mother's arms, and felt a deep sense of relief. But he knew better than to believe that the danger had fully passed. The kidnappers had escaped, and they weren't the type to simply give up. The first officer on the scene, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a serious expression, approached John. "Mr. Cena, I'm Officer Daniels. I need you to tell me exactly what happened." John nodded, his focus sharpening as he recounted everything. The girl's fear, the suspicious woman, the moment she tried to take off with the child, and the confrontation in the parking lot. Daniels took notes, his brow furrowing deeper with each passing detail. "Did you see which direction they ran?" Daniels asked. John turned toward the far end of the parking lot, scanning the area. "That way, toward the alley behind the supermarket. There was a black SUV, engine running, ready to go." These weren't amateurs. They knew exactly what they were doing. Daniels radioed in the information, instructing nearby units to search the area. "We've been getting reports of attempted abductions across the city. You might have just stopped a major operation." John clenched his jaw. "That means they'll try again." Daniels met his gaze. "That also means we need to catch them before they do." Another officer approached, leading the little girl and her mother toward them. The woman was still shaking, her face pale with residual fear. I don't know how to thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "If you hadn't been there—" John gave her a reassuring nod. "You don't have to thank me. I just did what anyone should have done." The little girl, her tear-streaked face still buried against her mother's shoulder, lifted her head. Her eyes, filled with a mixture of fear and trust, locked onto John's. For a moment, she just stared at him. Then, with a small, trembling hand, she reached out. John hesitated, then knelt down, gently taking her tiny fingers in his large, calloused hands. "You're safe now," he said softly. The girl sniffled, nodding slightly. "You saved me." John swallowed hard, feeling a lump in his throat. "You were really brave. I just made sure you had a chance to run." Officer Daniels took a step closer. "We'll need you to come down to the station to give a full statement, Mr. Cena." John stood, nodding. "Of course." Anything to help find those people. As he walked toward the police car, he couldn't shake the feeling in his gut. The kidnappers had gotten away, and something told him they wouldn't stay hidden for long. The police station was bustling with activity, officers moving quickly as phones rang and reports were filed. John sat in a small interview room, a cup of coffee untouched in front of him. Across the table, Officer Daniels flipped through a file before looking up. "Mr. Cena, based on your description, we believe the woman and the driver you encountered are part of a larger human trafficking ring operating in this area." John's stomach twisted. How many kids have gone missing? Daniels exhaled heavily. Too many. And the worst part is, they're careful. They operate in different locations, never hitting the same place twice in a row. They're organized. They use fake identities, burner phones, and stolen vehicles. John leaned forward. "What do you need from me?" Daniels studied him for a moment. "You're already a witness. But considering what you did tonight, I was wondering if you'd be willing to go a step further." John narrowed his eyes. "What are you asking?" Daniels hesitated, then slid a photograph across the table. It was grainy, taken from a security camera, but John recognized the woman immediately. The fake smile, the tight grip on the little girl's wrist. It was her. "We traced the vehicle to a warehouse on the outskirts of the city," Daniels said. "We don't have enough to go and guns blazing, but if we had someone keeping an eye on the place, watching for movement, we might be able to catch them in the act." John tapped his fingers against the table. "You want me to stake them out?" Daniels nodded. "Only if you're comfortable. I know you're not a cop, but let's be honest, after what you did tonight, you're more than capable." John exhaled slowly, considering it. He had spent his life training, preparing his body for challenges, for fights. But this was something else entirely. And yet, when he thought about the little girl's terrified eyes, the way she had clung to him, he knew there was no decision to make. He nodded. "I'm in." Daniels gave a small, approving smirk. "I had a feeling you'd say that." A few hours later, John sat in his truck across the street from the warehouse, his muscles coiled with anticipation. The building was large, run down, and mostly dark, save for a few dim lights illuminating the front entrance. A few vehicles were parked nearby, but none matched the black SUV from earlier. His earpiece crackled to life. "Cena, you copy?" It was Daniels. "Yeah, I'm here. So far, nothing. But I got a bad feeling about this place. Stay put. If anything moves, let us know. We got a team ready." John tightened his grip on the steering wheel, eyes locked on the warehouse. Hours passed, the city growing quieter as the night deepened. Just as he was beginning to wonder if this was a dead end, movement caught his eye. The front door creaked open, and a figure stepped out, a man in a dark hoodie, scanning the street before lighting a cigarette. A moment later, the black SUV pulled up, its headlights flashing twice. John's pulse quickened. A second figure emerged from the warehouse, the woman. She looked different now, her hair down, wearing a long coat, but it was her. No doubt about it. The SUV's back door opened, and John caught a glimpse of something that made his stomach drop. A child. Daniel's voice came through the earpiece. "Cena, what do you see?" John's jaw clenched. "We got a problem. They have another kid." Silence. Then, "Stay put. Backup is en route." But John's hands were already on the door handle. He wasn't waiting. He was stopping this. Right now. John Cena tightened his grip on the truck's door handle, his pulse thundering in his ears. The moment he saw the small figure in the back of the SUV, something primal kicked in. He had spent years training his body, preparing for fights in the ring, but nothing compared to the stakes of this moment. This was real. This was life or death. "Cena, stand down. I repeat, stand down. Backup is en route." Daniel's voice crackled through the earpiece, but John barely heard him. His gaze was locked on the woman from earlier, her posture different now, less composed, more hurried. She pulled something from her coat pocket, likely a phone, her fingers moving rapidly over the screen. She was making a call, ordering something. That meant time was running out. John Cena made his decision. He pushed the truck door open, stepping out onto the pavement with deliberate, measured steps. He wasn't reckless. He knew he needed to be smart about this, but he also knew he couldn't sit and watch another child disappear into the darkness. The man in the hoodie noticed him first. Their eyes met, and in that instant, the kidnapper knew. He knew who John was. And more importantly, he knew that John wasn't just another bystander who could be scared off. The man nudged the woman urgently. She turned, her expression shifting from surprise to irritation, and then to realization. John saw her calculating, assessing her options. She made a decision. The SUV's engine roared to life. The driver, a third figure who had remained unseen, was ready. They were going to run. Not happening, John muttered to himself before springing into action. He charged toward the SUV just as the driver threw it into reverse. The tires screeched against the pavement, smoke curling from the asphalt. The woman lunged for the back door, ready to shove the child inside, but John was faster. He grabbed her wrist, yanking her away with a force that sent her stumbling backward. The child inside the SUV let out a startled yelp. John turned just in time to see the driver slam the gear shift into drive, the vehicle lurching forward in an attempt to escape. The man in the hoodie sprinted toward the passenger side, but John reacted before he could get in. He grabbed the edge of the door and ripped it open. The force of it sent the man stumbling, but he recovered quickly, throwing a desperate punch toward John's face. John dodged, countering with a powerful forearm to the man's chest. The impact sent him crashing into the side of the SUV. "Stay down," John growled, but the man was already scrambling to his feet. Meanwhile, the woman was back on her feet as well, pulling something from her coat. Asterisk, asterisk, a knife, asterisk, asterisk. John barely had time to react before she lunged. He pivoted, avoiding the blade by inches, but she was quick, swinging again in a wide arc. John caught her wrist mid-swing, twisting it just enough to make her drop the weapon. She let out a shriek of frustration, trying to yank her arm free, but John held firm. And then the worst thing happened. The driver, in one last desperate attempt, made a move that sent ice flooding through John's veins. He reached back and grabbed the child. The little boy, a scared, trembling thing, no older than 7, was yanked forward, held in front of the man like a human shield. "Let us go, or he gets hurt," the driver barked, his grip tightening around the boy's small frame. John's blood boiled, his muscles tensed, his hands clenching into fists. He had to be careful. One wrong move, and the child could be in even more danger. "Easy," John said, his voice steady despite the fury coursing through him. "You don't want to do this." The driver's eyes darted around, searching for an exit strategy, but they had run out of time. The wail of police sirens grew louder. Flashing lights painted the night in streaks of red and blue. The cavalry had arrived. "It's over," John said, taking a slow step forward. "Let him go. Now." The driver hesitated. He knew it too. There was no getting away now. But desperation made people dangerous. John saw the flicker of intent in the man's eyes a second before he acted. With a sharp, last-ditch movement, the driver shoved the child toward John before attempting to break for the alleyway behind the warehouse. John reacted on pure instinct. He caught the child mid-fall, scooping him up as he pivoted. With his free hand, he reached out and grabbed the driver's jacket, yanking him back with a strength that sent him sprawling onto the pavement. The woman and the man in the hoodie were both already cornered by officers, their hands raised in surrender. The driver, winded from the impact, groaned in pain as he tried to rise, but John placed a firm boot against his back, keeping him pinned until the police rushed in to take over. "We've got him!" One of the officers shouted as cuffs clicked into place. John turned his attention to the little boy, still trembling in his arms. "You're okay now, buddy. You're safe." The boy sniffled, his wide eyes locking onto John's. Then, in the smallest voice, he whispered, "Thank you." John exhaled, the tension finally easing from his shoulders. The nightmare was over. The scene at the police station was a whirlwind of activity. Statements were given, arrests were processed, and names were taken. It turned out that the 3 individuals John had helped take down were part of a larger trafficking ring, one that had been operating for years. The little boy's parents arrived an hour later. Their tearful reunion, something John would never forget. The mother collapsed to her knees, hugging her son so tightly that he let out a small grunt. John stood back, watching silently. This was why he had done it. Not for glory, not for headlines, but for the moment a family was made whole again. Officer Daniels approached him, a small smirk on his face. You could have waited for backup. John chuckled, shaking his head. Didn't have the time. Daniel sighed, crossing his arms. You realize you took on an entire trafficking crew by yourself, right? John shrugged. They weren't that tough. Daniel snorted. Well, thanks to you, we've got more than enough evidence to shut this operation down for good. You did a hell of a thing tonight, Cena. John's expression softened as he glanced toward the little boy, now safe in his parents' embrace. I just did what anyone should have done. Daniels extended a hand. Well, not everyone would have. So, on behalf of this city, thank you. John shook his hand, nodding. Let's just make sure they never get another chance. Daniels grinned. Oh, don't worry. They won't. John took one last look at the family, at the relief washing over their faces. He had spent his career fighting battles in the ring, but tonight, he had fought one that truly mattered. As he stepped outside, the crisp night air filling his lungs, John Cena allowed himself a small smile. Because sometimes being in the right place at the right time was all it took to change a life.